Now, here we are at the reading questions for paper 2, writer's viewpoints, and there are 4 questions. You've got an hour to do them, and you're going to be reading this time 2 pieces of writing from 2 different writers giving their views on the same topic. So it's going to be the same topic but 2 different viewpoints. So this is the order that I suggest that you do the questions in, and it'll be clear why as we go through this video. 1, 3, 4 and 2. So we start with the odd numbers, 1 and 3, and then 4, the high scoring one, 16 marks, and then question 2. And I've put at the top there cover boxes question 2 and question 4 to remind us that before we start writing answers, we're going to look at the cover, we're going to look at the boxes, we're going to work out who these 2 people are and what it is they're writing about. And then we're going to just check ahead of time what it is question 2 and 4 are asking us to focus on before we start reading. So this is the timing. 5, 20, 25, 10. So I've rounded it up to the nearest 5 minutes, but that's approximate timings. And that corresponds to the marks 4, 12, 16 and 8. So that's the order of those questions. And as I said, before we start actually answering the questions, we've got to look at the cover and the boxes to find out what it is that they're about. So here is what the cover of the insert, the sources, the extracts, they call it 3 different things. They're basically 2 pieces of writing, 2 pieces of factual writing about a topic. So we're going to look at those first to find out what's the topic and who are these 2 writers. So what does the cover of the insert tell us about who's written them and what they're writing about? So we can see that the title of this piece is called The Other Side of the Dale. It's from a book by somebody called Gervais Finn, and it was written in 1998. So not that helpful there. What about the other one? Well, the other one's called The Ragged School, and it's from a diary that a teacher's written in 1849. So it's something about school, something about teaching. And there will always be one source that's quite modern. So 1998 is classed as quite modern, even though it's 24 years ago. And the other one that's really old, from sort of Victorian times, and this one's from 1849. So we're starting to get a sense of who these 2 writers are, and maybe what they're writing about. So here are the 2 boxes, and the box appears before the extract. And it's giving you an idea of what it is you're going to read. So the first one says, this extract is from a non-fiction book, well, we know it's going to be non-fiction, called The Other Side of the Dale, written in 1998 by Gervais Finn. Well, that's kind of the same that was what was on the cover. What else is there? About his experiences as a school inspector in the north of England. In the extract, he describes a visit to a primary school in Crompton. So we've got to ask ourselves, who's written this? What are they writing about? When did they write it? And where are they? So the who, this is going to be about, from a school inspector. And he's writing about his experiences and a description of a visit that he had to a primary school. So this is a real person that's had this real experience. And we've already seen that it was written in 1998, so relatively recently. and it's based in the north of England, Crompton or the Dale, neither of which you might have heard of, but it's the north of England. And then if we look at the second one, who's the writer here and what are they writing about? Source B is taken from a diary written in 1849 by a teacher at a ragged school. Ragged schools were set up to teach children whose parents were too poor to pay for their education. The schools were often housed in unsuitable buildings in poor areas of the city. So who's it this time? Last time it was a school inspector. Well, this time it's a teacher. And what are they writing about? They're writing about, it's a diary, so they're writing about what their experience was working in this school. When was it written? Well, it was 1849, so it's going to be a very different time, Victorian time, Dickensian. And where are we? We're in these ragged schools, which are in poor areas of the city, and they're unsuitable buildings. So we're starting to get, just from reading the cover and the boxes, we're starting to get an idea of these two writers and what their viewpoints might be. And we could also see what is the topic. Well, it's education. So one of the very good things about this exam is that the questions are predictable, and the wording and the layout of the questions is really the same each time, except for a few key bits. So these are the 4 questions as they would look on the page. You get a very big booklet to write in, but a lot of that is blank pages, and there's only really these small bits of writing that give you the questions. So question 4 and 2 are asking you to compare the whole of the 2 texts. So before we start reading the text, I want to have in the back of my mind what I'm going to have to write for question 4 and 2. What is it that we're going to have to compare in terms of these 2 writers and these 2 texts? So this is question 4 in full. For this question, you need to refer to the whole of source A and the whole of source B. Okay, so we know that. Compare how the writers convey their different attitudes to the 2 schools. And then underneath, there's some bullet points suggesting things that you should include, but we're going to cover those anyway. So the key thing that I'm really interested in, and the bit that you should be focusing in on in the exam, is this middle bit. What are we comparing? Well, we're comparing the writers' different attitudes to the 2 schools. How do these 2 writers feel about these schools? So I'm going to keep that in my mind when I start reading. How do they feel about these schools? And then question 2, again, is asking you to look at the whole source. So I want to know, before I start reading the sources, where I'm looking for information. What's the question going to be? And it says the children at the primary school and the ragged school behave very differently. Use details from both sources, so again, they're repeating that it's both sources, to write a summary of, what are we writing a summary of? The differences between the behaviour of the children. So that's going to be my focus. How are these children behaving differently in these 2 schools? So I'm going to keep that just in the back of my mind in case I come up with points from where we start reading of ideas that I could put in answer to these 2 questions. How do the writers feel different about the 2 schools, and how are the children behaving differently? So here are the 2 sources in full, and it's important to not be overwhelmed by what seems like a lot of reading. You can answer questions by just reading the first few bits. So, you know, it's important that you just don't give up. You read the first bit, see if you can come up with a point, and keep going. Okay, so we've looked at the cover, we've looked at the boxes, we've had a little skim and looked at question 2 and 4 and see what we're comparing. We've got a sense of who these two people are and what they're writing about, and we're going to get ready to start writing our answers. Now, remember, this is the reading section, questions 1 to 4, the reading section, so you're not getting any marks for your writing. So you don't need to worry about spelling or punctuation. If you want to use a word but you don't know how to spell it, it doesn't matter, use it. Don't worry about your written expression. You are marked for the points you make, your ideas about this piece of reading, and what quotes you can pick out to back up your points, and whether or not you can explain some of the words in the quotes. You only need to make a couple of decent points to be on track for a grade 4. And you don't have to read or understand every single word of the text. It would be unusual if you did, so don't get intimidated. If you come across words you don't understand, don't let it put you off. We're just going to focus on the bits we do understand, and we're going to find quotes from there. And like on paper 1, question 1 is supposed to be kind of a gentle start. So you're just looking for information, and they direct you to, in this case, just the first 10 lines, and they give you 8 statements, only 4 of which are true. So you go through and find each of the statements and check which ones are true and which ones are false. Now, they are not always 100% straightforward, so don't rush, just make sure that you've read carefully. The other thing is, while you're reading for this question 1, you might also start logging some ideas for question 4 and 2. How do the writers feel about the school, and what are the children like? Okay, so next we're going to go to question 3. Now, this question is exactly the same as question 2 on paper 1. How does the writer use language to describe Sister Brendan? And like on paper 1, they just give you a short piece. So this is about description, and as I say, it's exactly the same as it was on paper 1 question 2. And this is the same revision card, again, that was used on paper 1 question 2. So we're being asked, what is this person like? How is she described? And we're going to go through a point, evidence, explain process. So we're going to say what we think she's like. She's very friendly. Back it up with a quote that shows that she's friendly, and then we're going to zoom in on some words in our quote and say, oh, the adjective X suggests that, you know, she really welcomes the inspector and is delighted to have him at the school. So it's that same 3-point process. This is the lines that they're directing us to, where we've got to look for quotes that describe this Sister Brendan. So let's have a look just at the first bit of this and sort of see if we can do it. So, good afternoon to you, Mr. Finn, said Sister Brendan enthusiastically. I got your letter. We're all ready and waiting and raring to go. Okay, well, let's just stop there and say, what's this woman like? Okay, well, to me, she seems super friendly and energetic. So I might say, Sister Brendan is energetic and friendly. It says, I don't know, I could have the enthusiastically quote and explain what enthusiastically means, but I'm going to go for, it says, we are all ready and waiting and raring to go. and I'm going to say the 3 words ready, waiting and raring suggests that she's really keen to meet this inspector and show off her school. Right, so far so good. We've done 1 and we've done 3, so we're 25 minutes in. We've had 5 minutes on question 1 and 20 minutes on question 3, and now I'm going to spend 25 minutes on this question 4 and finish 10 minutes before the end with question 2. So let's remind ourselves what we're looking for. We're looking for the writer's attitudes to the school. So how does the inspector feel about this school, and how does the teacher who wrote the diary feel about their school? And then the other thing I'm going to try and keep an eye on is how the children are behaving and how they're different. And you might already have got some ideas from reading. Really, you've read most of source A at this point. You've read it for question 1 and question 3, so you might already have some points about how this writer, this inspector, feels about the school, and also you might already have got some points that you can note down about how the children are behaving at the school in source A. So I've already talked about not being overwhelmed by the reading, because it does seem like a lot, and I'm just going to sort of demonstrate how you can make points and have ideas without necessarily reading the whole thing. So that's what I'm going to show you now. Okay, so Sister Brendan, the head teacher, saw my car pull up outside her office window and was at the door of the school to greet me before I'd had the chance to straighten my tie and comb my hair. She beamed so widely that had she worn lipstick, I would have expected to see traces on her ears. Okay, so how does this guy feel about this school? Well, I think he feels really welcomed. He notices that she smiles massively at him and comes rushing out to greet him. So his attitude might be that it seems like a really welcoming school. Okay, so let's have a look at the other one. On the way to the school this morning, it was a dismal scene. Nothing but squalid dirt and idleness. The lanes leading to the school were full of men, women and children, shouting, gossiping, swearing and laughing in the most discordant manner. The whole population seemed to be on the eve of a great outbreak of some kind or another, ready for anything but work. Okay, so there's a lot of difficult words in there, and this is written in 1898, I think it said, so it's a different type of way of communicating. So some of the words are going to be unfamiliar. Dismal, discordant, what else is tricky? Squalid, idleness. And the advice is always, don't focus on the words you don't understand, just zoom in on the words that you do understand. Talk about dirt, ready for anything but work. So there's stuff there that you want to focus on, not on what you don't understand. I think that this writer feels like it's a really rundown, it's a rough area. The way they're describing it here seems like it's going to be a difficult place to work. But I've also popped up there another point about what this inspector, how he might feel about the school. He might feel like the head of the school is super smiley, really friendly. But the other writer, how do they feel about the people there? Well, I think they feel that it might not be a place of work and the pupils are going to be tricky to work with. So the point being is we've only read the first few lines of both extracts, and I think I could make a couple of points about how these two writers already feel differently about the schools. So hopefully that gives you courage to not get intimidated. Read this a little bit and see what you can come up with. All right, so I've got a couple of ideas of things I might say, the different attitudes to the two schools. So how are we presenting them? Okay, so we've got to present some points showing differences. It might say similarities, but this time it's saying differences. So these are the two things I think I can say. I can say in A, it seems like a friendly school. The writer thinks it seems friendly. But in B, the writer's first impression is pretty terrible. And so what I've got to do is I've got to go through that point, evidence, explain. So once I've got my point, I'm going to look for some evidence to back it up. And I'm going to have these two. She beamed so widely, shows she's friendly, it backs up my point that it seems like a friendly school. And then I'm going to pick that description, squalid dirt and idleness, because I know idle means lazy, and I know squalid means really, really dirty. So I've got my two bits there. I've got points and I've got evidence, quotes. So the last bit I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in on the words in the quotes and explain to the examiner that I get why it seems like a friendly school. And so I've picked the word beamed. The verb beamed shows how big her grin was, so very friendly, but I might zoom in on widely, that shows how massive her smile was. And then I'm analysing the quote, squalid dirt and idleness, and I'm going to say the area was dirty and the people seemed lazy, and the adjective squalid emphasises how grim the area was. So we're going to try and do that sort of 3 times. We're going to try and find 3 differences in terms of how these two writers feel about the schools, and do this point, evidence, explain process for each of those points. Okay, so this is the revision card to help you answer question 4. And it's slightly more complicated because you might be asked for differences, how the writers feel differently, or different attitudes to something, or it might be similar. So that's why you've got 2 writing frames at the bottom. On the left, it's got the writing frame if the writers you're asked about different attitudes, and on the right, if the question is, how the writers convey their similar attitudes or perspectives or feelings on something. But the point, evidence, explain process is the same. You make a point, you back it up with a quote, and you zoom in on words and explain. So you don't have to, zoom in on every single time and mention those tricky subject terminology words every single time, but try and use a word adjective or verb or simile or some kind of subject terminology word at least once. And 3 would be great. If you make a couple of points, that's good too. And the last question that we're going to do in the reading section and for the whole paper is this 8-mark 10-minute question 2. What are we doing? We have to come up with points that focus on the differences in the behaviour of the children. So there's no explain here. We're just making points and possibly quoting to back it up, but we're not analysing the language or anything else, just chucking down as many differences in the behaviour as we can come up with. And here's that final revision card up closer. Reminder, stick to the question. We only want you to write about the behaviour of the children. Don't start writing about anything else. If it's asking you for differences, you could say in A, the children are really well behaved, and a quote. However, in B, the children behave really poorly, and a quote. If it's asking you to say how they're similar, your point's going to be the same. So, I don't know, different extract. You know, both children's behaviour is great. They love being in school. In A it says, in B it says, and back it up.